mundane sense of the term, that it is materially relieved oppression. That is simply not possible in the material world. Everyone is oppressed by the forces of the modes of nature. Every body is conditioned. Every body is going to meet its conclusion. And there is no escaping this. But so we have to ask, how much freedom does one actually have? You know, it's interesting, the political dichotomy in America. The conservatives argue you should be free to have guns, and the liberals argue you should be free to have abortions. And they debate over how much freedom you should have to vote. But if there's a barbecue, everyone will come. So although there may be dichotomies on the political spectrum, in terms of their philosophy, actually they're very united. That is, sense gratification, amelioration of the material body is the purpose and the goal and the highest pursuit of life. So in that frame of mind, there really is no independence. There is no freedom from oppression. Therefore, as Prabhupada says, unless one is fully Krishna conscious, there will be oppression. On the other hand, if one is Krishna conscious, then no one has the right to rule over him, not only materially, but spiritually. In the Bible, there's a passage where Jesus is accused of being a social revolutionary, trying to foment discontent among the people. So he was asked, how will you deal with this threat? The government is threatening to arrest you as a radical, as a person to be concerned about for creating insurrection. So he famously said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. So this is the way in which the devotee balances this dichotomy of being a spiritualist in a material world. In other words, there are those who say, well, I should simply not have anything to do with the material world and let me go away and remove myself from all of the responsibilities, all of the pressures, all of the dualities that surround me in this world. And this is a natural inclination. If we see that things are not conducive for our spiritual growth, we naturally want to separate ourselves from them. When I was 18, I had been reading a lot of the impersonalist books by various prominent teachers of the day. And I was so very confused. The instinct was just to put myself out of the middle-class environment in which I was living. And I went to visit a couple of colleges to see, well, maybe here I will get enlightenment. But I could quickly see from the people I met, the teachers and the students, that spiritual enlightenment was not on the curriculum. So I just chose to leave. I just left. I hitchhiked across the country with no purpose, with no other agenda than trying to understand reality. And the various teachers I met, the various churches I attended, all of them had some whiff of spirituality with nothing substantial. And then I met devotees doing Harinam in Portland, Oregon. And there, I, for the first time, said, here are some people who are actually walking the talk. And not only were they exhibiting the symptoms of spiritual realization, but they had very concrete and tangible instructions for how I could join the experience. So this was all Srila Prabhupada's grace to nirvishesha shunyavadi, to remove this notion that to become free of material dualities, one has to remove oneself from them. It's a fearful condition when you think about it, being afraid of interacting with material nature. It's a very fearful position because we're going to be forced to deal with it, and yet we're trying to run away from it. So just as Arjuna gained courage on the battlefield by understanding his fight was not for winning the kingdom, but rather for pleasing Krishna. So similarly, the devotee gains the strength to deal with this material world in an appropriate way, to be in the world but not of it, to be willing to take up responsibility for service of the Lord without becoming attached to the results. So Maharaj Khadvanga is this ideal example. He was blessed to have knowledge of his impending death. You know, they say that a genuine astrologer can see when you're going to die, but they will never tell you. They can. It impedes one's ability to live if one has the foreknowledge of his departure date. But of course, in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, he was given this benediction. He knew he had 7 days. And similarly, Maharaj Khadvanga got this notice somehow from the demigods. You only have a few minutes left to live. So this was an impetus for him to immediately take shelter of Krishna. It's reminiscent of another great king, Maharaj Kulashekar, who had this beautiful prayer that Srila Prabhupada liked to repeat. Krishna tvadiya padapankaja panjaranta adyaiva me vishatu me manasa rajahangsa prana prayana samaye kapavata pittai kantava rodhana vidhau smarana kutaste. O Lord Krishna, let the royal swan of my mind now enter the tangled stems of the lotus of your feet. How will it be possible for me to remember you at the time of death, when my throat will be choked with mucus, bile, and air? In this case, Maharaj Kulashekar was asking, please let me die now, rather than risk being in so much distress when I'm dying that I won't be able to remember you. Let the swan of my mind become entangled in the stems of your lotus feet, the lotus stems of your lotus feet. This is, in a sense, a prayer for suicide, because if the swan were to put its head beneath the surface of the water and become entangled in the stems of the lotuses, it would be unable to come up for air and thus give up its life. So there are other examples we find in the Shastra of devotees wanting to sacrifice their lives rather than risk offense or risk forgetting Krishna in this world. One of them that, of course, comes to mind is Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami traveled to see Lord Chaitanya, but because of the political situation, he had to take the back roads. And on the back roads, he drank bad water and contracted some sort of infectious disease that caused oozing sores to break out all over his body. So when he came to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya was so happy to see him that he immediately embraced Sanatana in spite of these horrific contaminations. And yet Lord Chaitanya thought nothing of it. He was so much wrapped in love for his devotee that he immediately embraced him fully. So Sanatana Goswami was abhorred by this thought that the oozing, itching sores from his body could contaminate the body of the Lord. Therefore, he thought, let me end this miserable body. Let me kill myself. Let me throw myself beneath the Rathayatra chariot wheels and in that way leave this world remembering Lord Jagannath. So Chaitanya, he did not tell anybody about this plan, but this was his specific intention. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his omniscience, could understand the mind of Sanatana, and he approached him in a critical mood and said, you come to me and you tell me you're surrendering your body to me, and then you're going to go and take the same body and destroy it. What kind of hypocrisy is this? You're giving me something, but then you're taking it away. I have so much important work for you to do in this body. How can you be so disingenuous as to give it and then take it back? So in this way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu forbade Sanatan from committing suicide. Yeah, and he accepted him fully, even with his disease. So this is the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the mercy of all of us in the lineage of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that whatever our condition may be, Lord Chaitanya accepts us. Lord Krishna accepts us. This is so very important to deal with within ourselves when we're approaching Krishna in devotional service. We may feel, and many devotees feel this, it's one of the tricks of the mind, very prominent tricks of the mind, to say, you're not pure enough. This Krishna consciousness is so pure, you're not pure enough. You are too contaminated. Therefore, out of respect for Krishna, you should simply leave the association of devotees. Out of respect for the devotees, you should go away. This is the influence, actually, of the mode of ignorance or the mode of passion. In the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we find Lord Kapila describes how the devotee may perform devotional service that is affected by the modes of passion and ignorance. And the effects of those modes is to make one a separatist. Let me stay aloof from the devotees. Let me stay apart from the devotees. This is a reminiscent contamination from our impersonalist influences in our lives. If I am away from devotees, although nominally I'm doing so for the purpose of showing appreciation, you see how twisted it is. I'm too contaminated to be with devotees, therefore let me go away from the devotees. It is an expression of false humility that is actually a trick of the mind. So it is understood that we are spiritually contaminated, that we are deficient, that we are conditioned by the modes of nature. That's understood. That's why we're in the association of devotees. But rather than feel ourselves too fallen, as Sanatana Goswami attempted to do, to be in the association of Lord Chaitanya and the Vaishnavas, we should rather accept and understand that, yes, Krishna knows our fallen position. We don't have to hide it. We don't have to pretend it doesn't exist, nor do we have to let it dominate our lives. You see? If we are actually feeling fallen, then we want to be in the association of devotees. If we're actually feeling fallen, then we want to take shelter there. If we actually are feeling fallen, rather than feeling we need to be separate from the devotees, we feel much more strongly, I need to be with the devotees to be purified. You know, purification really only comes in relationship with the other Vaishnavas. You know, the example of the rock polishing machine. I may have mentioned this on a previous class, but it's such a good example. You can take rough stones, put them in this machine, which is like a centrifuge, and then just run it for a few minutes. And the rocks, by bouncing against each other, lose all of their rough edges and come out smooth and shiny with their inner beauty revealed. In the same way, interacting with the devotees will bring out our false ego. It will make us feel angry. It will make us feel envious. It will make us feel all these negative, unwanted things that are still lingering in our heart. So when those things come up, if we recognize them and give them voice, but not to the person who's causing them, you see? With great care, we express them, but we express them to those who are more advanced. We go to confess, really, I have these feelings that are so incompatible with my values as a devotee. What should I do? What is their root? With proper guidance, we can get to the root cause and understand them. If we express them, on the other hand, to the person who is bringing them out, it is not likely to help us actually remove these anarthas. Tamal Krishna Goswami used to say, he spent so much time in India and China as well as in America. And he said the difference between the East and the West is that in the East, everybody wants to save face. In other words, nobody would dare admit something that makes them look like an envious person. But in the West, everybody thinks if I just express my feelings, then they'll be better. If I wear my heart on my sleeve. And so there's problems with both approaches. There's problems with both approaches, just to show a sort of false humility that is actually underpinned by how can I take advantage of this person? This is not the spiritual position. But on the other hand, to just express our feelings wantonly, randomly, without any sort of consideration as to how they will impact people, this also is not healthy for a spiritually advanced person. So this is expressed in the Nectar of Instruction, Guyam Akyati Prichyati. We should reveal our anarthas in confidence to appropriate people. That is the way to deal with unwanted feelings. Not to think I need to end this body or I need to end my association with devotees, which are really, in a sense, the same thing. I just want to run from my problem rather than deal with it. When the great devotee Raghunath Das Goswami lost the association of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Swarup Damodar in Jagannath Puri, he went to Vrindavan with the same intention, I'm going to throw myself from Govardhan Hill and end my wretched life. I cannot tolerate this separation. So Rupa and Sanatan Goswami deterred him from suicide. Deterred him from suicide so that he could do so much valuable service for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in the prayer of Maharaj Khatvanga, he is just praying to use these last few precious moments of his life in the service of Krishna. And it's such a beautiful realization that we spend several verses here in the 9th canto discussing it. The 9th canto is compared to Krishna's neck. It's just holding the smiling face of Krishna, which we find in the 10th canto. So most of the 9th canto, not most, but much of it is devoted to genealogy. This explaining the lineage in which Lord Krishna appears. And this is an important part of scripture, and it's an important part of history, and yet it makes for very tough Srimad Bhagavatam classes. Just when these little eddies of Leelas appear in the lists of these great personalities, do we find such valuable lessons. My wife once was telling me when she was a young pious Catholic in New York City, she determined, I'm going to read the whole Bible. See, the Bible was sitting on the table, this big, thick family Bible was sitting on the table in the living room. And she was determined she was going to read it. But she got to it begins with these genealogies, at least the New Testament. I'm not sure about the Old. The New Testament begins with all its genealogy. This one begat that one, begat that one. And her attempts to read the whole Bible were derailed by these long lists of names. Interestingly, though, the lineage of Jesus begins with this one lived 1,000 years, this one lived 900 years, this one lived 800 years. Their lifespan goes from 1,000 years down to the brief lifespan of Jesus's immediate family. Very similar to the descriptions in the Bhagavatam about how lifespans diminish in Kali Yuga. But the point is that we have this little excerpt about Maharaj Khatvanga here in the 9th canto, and he's glorified and remembered for this purpose, that when confronted with his inevitable demise, he immediately turned all of his attention to Krishna. That is our wonderful gift from Srimad Bhagavatam. Whether Maharaj Parikshit or Maharaj Khatvanga, we have this deep realization that we know what to do in the case of an emergency. One of my godbrothers was on an airplane once that encountered engine trouble and was, from all appearances, going to crash. So everyone on the plane began screaming and wailing. And he just pulled out his beads and started chanting at the top of his lungs, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And he just kept chanting through the whole thing. Somehow the plane managed to recover from the mechanical problem. And afterwards, some of the people were asking him, what were you doing? You were the only one who wasn't freaking out. You were the only one who seemed to know what to do. So, of course, he explained to them about the shelter of the holy name. And they were appreciative, but it did not last. This is the problem with the material consciousness, isn't it? That there may be some brief awakening, like this whole pandemic thing has brought so much increased awareness about the tenuous condition of material life. Jivala kalamala, how the drop of water on a lotus leaf, they can fall off at any moment. It's brought so much awareness, but we see as soon as the thread begins to diminish, people are right back to their previous activities. This is called smarshana vairagya, the renunciation of the burning ghat. That when people go to see the relative being cremated, everyone becomes very sober. Everyone realizes this is going to happen to me. And for a few days, there is some sobriety and some rectification of unwanted practices. But then very quickly it goes, because it is swallowed up by the ephemeral opportunities presented by this material world. So this is the position of the devotee, that we see through the folly of material existence. And we recognize every single day could be our last day. Every single moment could be our last moment. And we are ready. We know what to do at that moment, just like Maharaj Kadvanga. So this is the great gift of spiritual knowledge and spiritual realization. It puts everything in perspective. You know, when people die, their world just shrinks. Just like all of us, when we get ill, for a few days, we can't do anything. We just want to lie in our bed and be left alone. Our world shrinks. Our concerns about our responsibilities are just set aside because we have to deal with the physical realities. But just imagine if we are not leaving this world in some plane crash or car accident or something abrupt, but we're leaving through the inevitable deterioration of the material body. Just imagine how our concern for things will reduce and how our world will shrink. This is practically what happens when we see people dying, that their span of attention and influence just shrinks and diminishes to nothing. So when this happens to a devotee, the devotee knows how to take shelter of Krishna. This is the great boon of education and spiritual life. We're prepared. And because we're prepared, we are calm. And we don't freak out, and we don't become panicked by the prospect of leaving this body. We're prepared, we're practiced, we're not surprised. If anything, we're surprised it's taken as long as it has. We're grateful for the opportunity to engage this body in Krishna's service. But if it becomes useful or useless, then we say, why should I try to hang on to it? You know, the average person in the United States spends $250,000 in the last year of their lives on medical expenses. This is the average, because we're trying so desperately to hang on to it. But when this body is finished, then we know that we have a whole life in front of us that is going to be even more favorable for devotional service. And although it's unpleasant, nobody wants to do it, we recognize that it is something that is propelling us forward. However, it can't be rushed like the suicide examples that I mentioned. This is never acceptable. One of the most striking examples of this knowledge is in the pastimes of Srivas Thakur. Today is the disappearance day of Srivas Thakur, the incarnation of Narada Muni, the eternal associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Srivas Thakur was a householder, but very detached. He was ridiculed, actually, because he would not make an effort to do anything to maintain his family. He was born in Bengal, but came to Navadvip because it was recognized as a center of learning. And of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was performing his pastimes there. But when he arrived, although he was a learned Brahmin, he did not make any endeavor to make money from his erudition, as was the custom by almost everyone in Navadvip. See, Navadvip was a center of learning, but it was also very degraded because everybody was just trying to profit from their education and selling boons and various yagyas to the highest bidder. So Srivas Pandit did not do any of that. And even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, how do you maintain yourself? So he said, and he had, by the way, a large household. He was one of 5 brothers, and he had children and other relatives, but he made no effort to maintain himself. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, how do you do it? How do you maintain yourself? He said, I just say 1, 2, 3. If I fast for 1 day, okay, I can live. I fast for 2 days, okay, I can live. And if I fast for 3 days, then I'll just go and throw myself in the Ganges. And I never get to the 3rd day. Krishna always sends something. So Lord Chaitanya then assured him, the goddess of fortune will always provide for you everything you need. This is also there in the Gita, of course. Tesham nitya biyuktanam yogakshemam baham yaham. To one who's constantly devoted, Krishna says, I will carry what they lack and preserve what they have. I will provide all their needs. So it's challenging to put ourselves in a position of dependence. And externally, we may not be able to do it. We may have to deal with our daily responsibilities in a way that is absolutely essential to keep us, to sustain ourselves in this world. We cannot immediately take sannyas and artificially just go out depending on Krishna. But we can depend on Krishna fully in our current situation. We can recognize that whatever opportunity Krishna has given us is coming from him. And we can maintain ourselves responsibly while remembering him. Mama nusmara yudhyacha. In the early days, all of us were going to be sannyasis. All of us were we're just going to renounce this world. But in practice, virtually none of our generation did this. And many who tried could not sustain it. So better we be prepared to deal with our responsibilities in this world in a suitable and appropriate way. This is how we can apply the example of Srivas Pandit. He was so dependent on Lord Chaitanya that he did not have to worry about his maintenance. Lord Chaitanya promised personally to take care of it. So how do we take care of it? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may provide us the means. This is the point. What is actually important is that we're practicing and preparing ourselves each day, that this day might be my last one. And we're practicing and preparing ourselves that by the end of the day today, I may be needing to fix my mind on Krishna because my material situation may be gone. This is the lesson of Maharaj Khatvanga. When he was ready, when he was informed, then he was immediately prepared. So the independence that wisdom gives is actual independence. This is actual freedom. No one can rule such a person. No one has proprietorship over the life of such a person. There's a section, beautiful section in the 10th canto, when Narada Muni is addressing the two sons of Kuvera, Manigriva and Nala Kuvera. I'm going to read it to you here in a poetic rendition. So Narada comes upon these two young demigods who are drunk, naked, and cavorting in the water with young celestial women. And so he says to them, said Narada, who is, of course, Srivas Pandit, said Narada, material resources, my dear boys, like beauty, education, or the fame you both enjoy, are all surpassed by money, for it makes men very proud. The rich drink wine and have more sex than others are allowed. The rich man, smug and satisfied with all that he's acquired, quite often grows malicious in pursuit of his desires. To please the mortal flesh he loves and thinks will never die, he murders helpless creatures just for sport and exercise. He does not see the suffering he'll bring himself, the fool, when his fine body ends up ashes, worms, or vulture stool. He thinks his body durable, long-lived, and very strong, and never asks to whom his body actually belongs. Does one's employer own his body? Does his mother dear? Or is it a possession of the king or the premier? At death, the family puts one's body on a funeral pyre. Is it the asset of the oldest son who lights the fire? Do slave owners possess the body due to bill of sale? Or is it owned at death by dogs who eat and wag their tails? In fact, the body comes from sand and goes back into sand, as anyone who thinks about it surely understands. So while we need to maintain ourselves in this world, we know that nothing we could ever acquire in this world can replace our foundational knowledge of the ephemeral body and the eternal soul. This is a lesson of Maharaj Katvanga, Narada Muni, and Srivas Pandit. So we'll stop there. Thank you very much for your kind attention. If anyone has some comments now or any topics for discussion, please do bring them up. Haribo Prabhu, yes, please.
Question, Prabhu?
Yes.
Anyway, that example of Srivas not endeavoring for his maintenance, and sometimes devotees choke at that. Well, I have to have a job. I have to have a job. You know, that we should do something. It's not just that he was idle. It's not just that he was lazy, but he was vigorously preaching.
Yes.
It's like Jesus sent his disciples out. He said, go out 2 by 2, go and preach. Don't worry about where you're going to sleep. Don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about what you're going to wear, but preach. Right? Seek first the kingdom of God. All else will be there for you, you know? So if we're vigorously preaching, you join the army, Prabhupada gave the analogy, they give you a gun, they give you shoes, they give you socks, they give you a tank, you know. You join Lord Chaitanya's movement and really join it and vigorously, like you said there, you know, if you really, really put yourself into that activity and that's your desire and that's your focus with everything you've got, then Krishna provides. He's providing for everyone, even the elephant who eats 200 kilos, this and that. So that's really an interesting thing, that it's not just that we don't do anything for ourselves, but we do try to serve Krishna and to push on Lord Chaitanya's movement.
Thank you very much for rounding out that example. Yes, that's very important.
You said it, but you know, because it's something that's easily misunderstood, and because people, well, we have to do something. I mean, you know, of course you have to do something. But what do you have to do? What are you going to do with your energy, your time, your resources, your intelligence, your gifts, whatever you've got, your strength? Use it for preaching, you know. And we've had that experience that Prabhupada just called us, come on, do this. And it makes no material sense, you know. How can I do this without having a job? You know, and so the tendency is to, Prabhupada said, they go and they get their PhD, and then they take the diploma and they put it in their mouth and they go to somebody and say, please hire me, please hire me, please. And he said, that's ridiculous. That's not what devotees do. We're supposed to be independent, responsible. We can be entrepreneurial. Even Kolovich or Sridhar, he was selling banana cups, but he wasn't working for a karmi boss. You know, Prabhupada gave up his, go on.
Mhm.
What were you going to
Well,
say?
yeah, I don't want to discourage those who have to work in conventional jobs, because for many that is their situation, their dharma. I believe it's important to
There
have
are
equal.
exceptions. There are exceptions.
Yes.
There are times when Prabhupada said, okay, go get a job. But in an emergency, you can do anything, but you just stay in that job decade after decade and go there and get your salary and spend your 8 or 10 hours working for a karmi boss. You should say, I desire to use this time and energy in Krishna's service. And I plan and I rack my brain. How can I more focus on something that's we were just talking yesterday when one of the devotees was working for us now. He said, I was working at this job and my boss told me, don't bring that book in here. Don't talk about Krishna. Don't put that picture up, Even a teacher is forbidden to speak about God. Now, I mean, in an emergency, you may have to do something. The fireman breaks down the door, but you don't have to break down the door every day or keep breaking down the door every day. That's absurd. And a Brahmin is forbidden to work for a karmi boss. There's exceptions to everyone. And if somebody's doing the humble best under the circumstances they're in, Krishna's pleased. But to just go on and on and on and on and on, or plan to do that, I don't know if that's what Prabhupada was telling us. I as far as I heard, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, for me, the measure is, can a person maintain their sadhana? If they can maintain chanting 16 rounds, following the principles, then it's really not so important if that's what they have to do for maintenance. It may be their particular service for Krishna, as long as they're not letting it eclipse their sadhana. At that point, I agree with you. There's
That's
nothing.
a good start. Sadhana is a good start, but we were just talking yesterday. Prabhupada, one devotee said to Prabhupada, I see you want us to be Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada said, no.
Well,
Babaji sitting on Radhakund, chanting rounds day and night for years and decades. He's being Krishna conscious, but we are not Bhajananandi. We are Ghostananandi. I want you to chant 16 rounds and then vigorously preach. I want you to give Krishna consciousness, not just to be Krishna conscious. But if you give Krishna consciousness, you'll be Krishna conscious. What is our desire? What is our spiritual master asking us to do? Sit and chant our rounds and then go to work and get a paycheck. I didn't hear that from Prabhupada. But maybe, there's exceptions.
Okay, any other comments on this subject?
Please.
Other thoughts? I was in, let's see. Okay, I was in a, please.
I just kind of, this topic is like a little bewildering to me. I'm not sure if you're able to hear me.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Prabhu?
Yes, I can hear you.
And this topic is sometimes slightly bewildering. Yeah, this topic is slightly bewildering to me because I see Srila Prabhupada personally worked as a manager of a particular pharmacy for a very long time. Like he worked most of his life like that. Bhaktivinoda Thakur worked for the British for a very long time. Of course, like they means, and when we consider Krishna conscious movement is like transplanted in the West very recently, but it's been in practice in the Indian society for a very long. Indian social structure or the regular Varnashram works where Grihasthas, like not all Vaishnavas are like going to be in the Varnashram in the Brahmin category. We may just give them second initiation as an institution, but not all like Vaishnavas are going to be Brahmanas in a sense. Like even though we consider them more than Brahmanas, in their psychophysical nature, they may not all be like Brahmanas literally, because in the because giving Brahman to a lot of people is a very new thing also within the Gaudiya Sampradaya also. So there's so many considerations. So considering the movement was very young and we had strong opinions and strong ways of lifestyle and prescriptions. But when if we want the Krishna consciousness to be into a broader society, we want because I see India, I see so many people practicing, like thousands of devotees following. It's very difficult to expect them when they come from a social structure where the predominantly grihasthas because Kalau Shudra Sambhavan, most of the people are like, they are born and brought up to make a living through work. And I don't see Indian devotees giving up their career for anything, risking too much, their family security and all these things. As you said, East and West think very differently. East die, but better die very securely. That's the attitude of a person from the East. So I just like, I'm very curious how, like, I see a lot of devotees practicing here, very exemplary, like sadhakas, and also preaching and practicing, but they all have their regular jobs also. But I see the balance also. It's not just going always just being there, but yeah, I think you got my question.
I do. It's a really good question, and this whole topic is so important. I really appreciate your point, Prabhuji, about the goal being to preach, and having and nourishing and cherishing the desire to just give our full life to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. But as you're also astutely pointing out, Prabhu, we see that in Prabhupada's life. He also had this desire, but he spent most of his adult life meeting his ordinary responsibilities. Let's just be practical here. It's some people have the ability to be entrepreneurial enough where they don't have to work for others. Other people don't. Some people have the utter dedication to spirituality that they are willing to live without any visible means of support, but they're rare. So Vaishnava is above the Brahmin, above the Kshatriya, above the Vaishya, above the Shudra. And it's actually an offense to equate a Vaishnava with one of these categories because they are on the Vaishnava platform. The reason I'm a little allergic to the hard line approach where it's always bad, is because it discourages people. It discourages people who otherwise could be Vaishnavas. If they think to be a Vaishnava, I've got to be a preacher, then they may just say, well, I can't be a Vaishnava because I can't be a preacher. I've got to do my job. Why do they job? Because social pressure, as you're saying, just a sense of love for the family members that, well, my children are dependent on me. I can't just abandon them. Does that make a person inferior?
We're not saying abandon the children.
Yeah, but just to
be either independent or work for a devotee. We're saying anybody's free to desire. And people can say, no, Krishna can't support us. No, Krishna can't do that. Wait a minute, there's two philosophies. Either Krishna can support us, he's floating the planets in space, he's within and between every atom, he knows what he's doing, and he loves you, and he's in control. And anybody's free to desire. Say, I desire to do as much as possible to help Srila Prabhupada push on Lord Chaitanya. Anybody can desire like that. And if they're doing their honest best, Krishna's pleased. It may look like this or like that externally, but anybody can say, I really want to help the devotees. I really want to serve my spiritual master. I really want to take less for myself, keep a simple life, not a big material situation, but let me have a desire to serve Krishna. And Krishna, Savasya Chahamriti, son of his told, when Krishna's in the heart, he sees what you desire, and he can bring you from whatever situation you're in to move forward motion in spiritual life. Just don't get stuck in thinking, I've got it now, I've got my job, and I don't know. I just don't think, as far as I've heard from my spiritual master,
I appreciate, yes, the desire has got to be in the heart, even if I'm in this situation.
Everybody's free.
I'm remembering the 10th chapter of the 12th chapter of the Gita. Remember where Krishna says, best thing is to think of me constantly and love me without reservation. If you can't do that, follow the rules and regulations of Bhakti Yoga. If you can't do that, then work for me.
Right.
What you're saying, I completely agree. Working for Krishna. My job is my offering to Krishna. It may not be on the highest platform, but my job is my offering to Krishna. One of the beauties of the Gita is that ecumenical quality that Krishna expresses there, that he's loving and accepting to everybody.
Right.
So I'm reacting a little bit to what you're saying because I work with young people all the time, and the majority of them have to go out and get secular jobs. And I'm always referencing this section of the Gita. Yeah, it's like the Mormon kids, they can give a couple of years to the mission, by doing that, they get all these material benefits. These young devotees can give a couple of years to the mission typically, but then they want to get married and the mission isn't going to support them. And they know that.
I was listening to a phone call with 3 GBC members, and one said, the devotees don't commit. They stay a couple of years, then they go away. And the other GBC member said, you see, it's our responsibility to commit to the devotees. As long as they'll sleep on the floor in a room with 5 people in a sleeping bag and work without any pay, we're committed to them. But then what are we providing for them when they want to take the householder ashram? So we see this restaurants, there's yoga classes, there's massage therapy, there's the guest program. You know, we have somebody working with the guest program now who's a lawyer with the United Nations. His father's a high court judge. And I've seen him shaking hands with Barack Obama, you know, and he, after 9 years working for them, he came and he worked with us for the guest program. He said, I do more preaching in one day with the guest program than I did 9 years with the United Nations. So we need a hybrid. We need devotee enterprises created by the leadership. If they don't, you know, in the old days, Prabhupada said, move in, and he put us to work, you know, everybody. And I think there's it's not just one or the other. Okay, you're at this point, and where are you going to go from here? What are you desiring? And can we create something that the person has the dignity and they're free to preach, not just chant their rounds, but they're free to preach. When you're in a situation where your karma boss says, don't bring that book in here, you should get out of there like a burning building. You know, you can desire, and Krishna will help you.
Thank you, Prabhu. We have another question here from Kartik.
Yeah.
Is there time, Gorsuna Prabhu?
Yes.
You mentioned that death cannot be rushed. I want to ask whether the timing of death is predetermined or a matter of chance. Maharaj Kadvanga's story seems to indicate that it is predetermined. I'm thinking of mass casualty events like the Miami condo collapse. It is difficult to understand how so many people can have their death predetermined in the same time, at the same location, in the same way. So in the Gita, Krishna says that the intricacies of karma are very difficult to understand. And you can't really tell where they begin and where they end. Our death is predetermined by our karma, but when we surrender to Krishna, that karma changes. It's called Krishna karma. It becomes in Krishna's hands. And so Krishna will adjust things according to the desire, his desire and the desire of the devotee. So just a very good, I mean, your question is really good. It is changed for the devotee is the short answer. Prabhupada was once, a palmist said, would you like me to read your palms? To which he said, if you have not clapped enough in kirtan, then there are still lines on your palm to be read. So chanting, taking shelter of Krishna changes our, whatever material fate we were subjected to. But in any case, the body's going to end, so we need to be prepared. I hope that addresses your question, Kartik Prabhu. All right, so I just, Sundar Ananda Prabhu, would you like to speak?
Please, Prabhu, yes, if I can say something about the previous topic. So I actually had the good fortune of being of helping out like Adi Purush Prabhu in his mission and what he's doing. So we used to have very briefly, we used to have a small juice bar right in the front of the storefront of what he's doing, and I've given this some thought and spoken to devotees, and where I can see a point that there are gradual stages, and I totally agree with that. I think that's how it should go, and I can tell you from personal experience that it does involve a lot of risk, a lot of financial risk, and stability and all that, and not everyone it might not be everyone's cup of tea. And basically at the end of the day, I think we can all still make the progression towards that goal of having an entrepreneurial business. I would agree that would definitely be the ideal in a situation where you don't have to go like a 9-to-5 job and work for a karmi boss, and like Adi Prabhu said, not allowed to bring the Bhagavad Gita and so on. So yeah, but one more thing I would like to suggest is for those who have a secular job is what I noticed. There is still a way to find a job that at least allows you to have more time to do these other things like preaching, like that I think, Prabhu, there is not much excuse to not do. I mean, you can still have a job, but there are like a zillion jobs out there. And I know personally, because I've changed jobs, and I know that some jobs will really grind you to death, where you just you forget about everything, like you just zone out from 8 to 6 or whatever, but there are jobs which actually they can, in Citigroup, where I used to work, like in New Jersey, we actually had a prayer room where there would be the Muslims would come and do namaz, and us devotees, like 3 or 4 of us, would go and sit there and wait for them to finish, and then we would actually chant there. And that was like a great. I don't think like all companies would do that, but that was, I mean, it was that good. And so there are jobs that will allow you to ride both things, and I think we should at least try for that, even if you're not doing the whole entrepreneur and preaching like Adi Purush Prabhu does. And that also like is possible. But then I would also like to say, like you mentioned, Kalakantha Prabhu, that it comes with a whole lot of risk and upheaval and so on. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
So let me
Thank you very
respond to
much.
that very briefly.
I appreciate
In
it.
Philadelphia, there was
Actually, Athena Yoga has a question. She hasn't had a chance to speak. Would you like to say, Athena?
Hi, thank you so much. This is in response or just contributing to this topic and conversation. I'm glad that Adi Purusha Prabhu is able to stay on. Sometimes I know he has to go about his duties. I think everything said, and I apologize, I'm no one, and of course I'm very junior, and I don't have the same responsibilities as many Grahasta couples and children. But it's a comment to recognize, I guess, both things that are said. And I actually really like what Sundar Ananda Prabhu said and Garshram Prabhu and all their contributions. As a junior devotee, seeing senior devotees, I guess, in the movement practicing very nicely and seeing how they live their lives, I understand in one sense, you're not saying that it's the model because my path is different. But if I could throw out some, I guess, examples, and perhaps Adi Purusha Prabhu, Kalakantha Prabhu can comment. For example, when I say Yashoda Dulal Prabhu, he's a very, very successful materially also in the secular world, but he engages his nature and his qualities in Krishna service. So all of the pandemic, he organized all these speakers, all these series. He's able to just organize my understanding is perhaps he has his time for his job and everything else. That time he makes sure he engages in Krishna service or in Krishna consciousness. And that's perhaps what Sundar Ananda Prabhu says. Maybe he doesn't have again, as in Bhagavad Gita, engaging your nature in Krishna's service. Maybe he doesn't have that entrepreneurial spirit or the Brahminical quality to preach in the same way that is the philosophy, and he preaches in his own way. He has all these examples how he has a bowl of like not chambers, like granola bars on his desk, which was offered. So it's prasadam, and that's his preaching. He gives it to his coworkers, and he's very high up. And then if his team members come to him with any problems, that's the time when he'll bring in Krishna conscious philosophy. He's not outwardly preaching, but he's a mentor. He's preaching and giving prasadam, and again, using his service, he might not be able to renounce everything, and his nature perhaps to be, I won't call it so Brahminical, but he preaches in that way. And if I look at, there's a very nice devotee, Mandala Gopal Prabhu, who is, I think he's part of GBC's Strategic Planning Committee. He is like the director of communications for Tawako Temple in New Jersey, and he has a very successful job. But he too, when I don't know how he manages both or all of it, but it's like the time is set for his job. And then he's director of communications for all of North America. And then he's like doing some Tawako temple. And then perhaps there's one argument where he has a son now going to college. And so he has to be able to provide for that. And going to a private college in the US is very expensive. One can go to work in the secular world, but be detached from the results, do his duty, not get so wrapped up in greed, not get so wrapped up in winning everything, do his duty nicely, provide for his family, and then do Krishna consciousness very nicely. And this goes to, he also teaches all these Bhakti Shastri courses. I mean, I don't know how he does it. It's just very, very impressive. And I remember this probably goes to Adipurusha's Prabhu. I understand, as Grashram Prabhu said, time, place, and circumstance, when Prabhupada was here, they needed to spread the movement. They were planting a seed, and you had to just preach. Like that was the dire need at that time. And I understand that with all the disciples, there could be, I don't say a very hardcore mentality, but the question came up. I remember this was in the Tawako Temple Sangha. Madhavan Gopal says, well, just throwing it out there, what if I left my job and then, I had to provide for my family and I just preached? He has, say, more of a Brahman quality. But Prabhupada always said you should never take money to preach Krishna consciousness philosophy. So he said, could I take money for that? That's really not so much in the philosophy. And I remember, recommended. And I remember Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj said this. And I think, again, it could be controversial. And I'd love to hear, say, Adipurusha Prabhu's thought on this, because there are devotees who are actively trying to engage their entire lives in Krishna service, but are in the Grahastha ashram. And for example, at Bhakti Center, there are Grahasthas and they accept a paycheck for their service at Bhakti Center. And I remember Jayadvaita Maharaj said, he said, I'm not here to condemn anyone, but no one should ever get paid for service. You have a job, but your service is your service. And he's like, you shouldn't be paid to go on the altar. When you open up a temple, you need to have already 10 pujaris ready to go, working, doing the service without getting paid for it. And there should be enough cooks who want to do it as a service and not get any money. And again, I know the people at Bhakti Center, and again, in today's Western world, I just think it's nice that they want to engage their entire service in Krishna, fully Krishna conscious and accept a little paycheck. Like I think that's better for me, than the temple working in the secular world. But that seems to be against the philosophy. And then you take a look at the Tawako Temple, the president, and say Madhavan Gopal. They're building a Parsippany temple. These devotees are actually engaged in the outside world, but then they donate $100,000 to the temple building. How could they do that if they didn't work in the outside world and save it? And that was their role as, I don't say as a Vaishya or whatever it is. So their role was contributing these large donations to build a temple for Krishna, which is in Krishna's service. So they can't say go out and speak the philosophy and distribute books, but they've worked so hard their whole lives. And these people are maybe in their 50s. And when the time comes, they're donating $100,000. And then next round, they need to raise, $8 million, $4 million, another $50,000. And this is their savings. And so this is their contribution. And they wouldn't have been able to do that if they didn't work in the secular world, and be detached from their jobs, their day jobs, but then completely immerse their time and their free time in Krishna consciousness. And I see that with the Tawako Temple, where they endeavor. Running a temple is not easy, and they're able to do it. So
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I actually have to step away here shortly. So if I may just make one comment and then I'll step out. And if you want to continue the discussion, I totally agree with these points that you're bringing up. And the overall issue for me is other devotees. Do we judge them? Is it our responsibility to evaluate how some other devotee is living their life? I don't know all the things that they have to deal with. I don't understand all their pressures. Therefore, what right do I have to say what they're doing is right or wrong? Every living entity has a unique way of pleasing Krishna. Mm-hmm. And how that manifests in individuals' lives is beyond my scope to evaluate or judge. This is one of the qualities of devotional service in the mode of passion, again mentioned in the third canto, that the devotee in the mode of passion thinks that I'm the best devotee. And also one of the qualities of the mode of ignorance mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita is that the person thinks my work is the only work, you see? So we've got to have a broader scope and let people find their own way to please Krishna. There is not one size to fit all, except for chanting the holy name, except for trinadapi sunichena, treating others with respect. Those are principles that are inviolable. But beyond that, and of course the four regulative principles, beyond that, there's just an infinite number of ways where people's service will manifest. So best policy, and I try to teach our students here at the Gainesville Krishna House, just don't be judgmental towards people. You express your own way, let them express theirs. Come together for kirtan, come together for Srimad Bhagavatam, come together for prasadam. Do what you can to serve Srila Prabhupada in spreading this Krishna consciousness from whatever position. Stanestita, Shrutigatim, Tanuman, Manobai. Just stay in your position and try to serve Krishna. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for the invitation this morning. Good to see you all.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for your time and also the lively discussion. Thank you, all the devotees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Grace Kalakantha Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. The Prabhupada ki jai. Hare